Yeah,
But it's been raining every day. Like,
we've been lucky so far.
it's interesting.
Okay.
Morning, supposed to go back after.
Good morning. Good morning.
Bubble up there.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Okay. So why don't we get started? Okay. The topic of today's Tshuva Moish, I think you'll like this one. Po'alim shemekablim schar namoch avor avodatam v'rotzim la'avod la'at meharagil. Workers are getting paid a low wage, and because of that, they want to work slower than normal.
Have the guys that make a full wage. What do you mean? That should be the shot.
I was thinking about government workers. You know, I have never seen people move so slowly as people who work for the government. DMV, border, at the border. Passport,
all that
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
You know why civil servants shouldn't look out of the window in the morning? They have nothing to do in the afternoon.
That's good.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. All right. Anachnu ba'alei mikzoa shovdim b'chevra mesuyamet. So we all are of a certain trade or profession, and we work for a certain company. V'hamavid sham mishalem lanu pachot mima shemekubal l'shalem leba'alei mikzoa kamonu. Our employer is paying us less than what the going wage for that kind of trade would be. Okay? And we resent it, obviously. Ha'im mutar lanu la'asot hafsakot gedolot yoter v'la'avod la'at meharagil. Are we permitted to take additional breaks, longer breaks, to work a little bit slower than normal? Behetem lischar shehu mishalim lanu, commensurate with the wage that he's paying us. In other words, we just feel we want to give it to the man, and because our employer is paying us peanuts.
Work to rule.
What?
Work to rule.
What is that? I don't know what that phrase means.
They don't do overtime. They don't go the extra mile.
And they work slow.
That's unions do that. That's the rule.
Yeah, they're not
Really?
gonna go on strike, they work to will.
Government's
saying
doing that.
Government's what?
Good at that.
Government workers?
No, when they don't get enough paid or whatever, the unions or whatever, then they tell the employees work the rule, so they don't work as hard. They're not going to
Teachers
strike.
won't do extracurricular activities,
Uh-huh.
they won't do anything up.
All right, so
above their-
you're saying that this is a shaila that is like, it's part of a culture of unions where they encourage the employees to pull back on their commitments to work. And this is what the question now is it permissible for me to participate? I'm a Jew. I'm supposed to be faithful to my employer, but he's paying us substandard wages.
You also have a standard of pay that you can't go below.
Well, you got a minimum wage, right? Yeah.
So is this a below minimum wage question? or
It's
is
a,
this
it's,
just
it's a
another
good question. He doesn't specify.
Because if it's minimum wage, it's not a question.
Yeah, right.
Just don't think it's enough. But it said at the beginning, right?
Yeah. They feel that we're not getting paid an amount that we're worth for this particular trade that we
That's pretty
do.
much every employee I have.
Okay.
If they took the job based on that rate of pay,
And they took the job based on that beta
Yeah,
pay.
workers
Right.
make, you know.
So they knew what they were getting into. I don't understand. They can then say you're not paying me enough.
Okay, your point is well taken. So let's take a look. Kosav Harambam, Shahapoel Muzhar b'meleches Bal Habayis Shelo Yitbalel Ma'atkan u'Ma'atkan u'mevazvez et zmano shel Bal Habayit. The Rambam writes in the laws of employer-employee relations that a worker is commanded, in other words, he has an obligation to work for his employer and not take breaks here and breaks there to waste the time of his employer. But rather, he has to be very exacting with the time while he's working. And to illustrate how careful the rabbis were about this halacha, the Gemara says that if you're in the middle of a work day and you get a lunch break, you can't take extra time to recite the fourth bracha of Birkas Hamazon because that might cut into the time of your employer. In other words, take whatever time you need to eat lunch and take whatever time it takes to say the first three brachos of Birkas Hamazon. Don't even say the fourth one, which was rabbinically mandated bracha, Hatov v'Hametiv, right? Because you're not allowed to take away the time of the balabayas, right? So can you imagine? It's like you go for the job interview and the guy says, how quickly do you bench? Yeah, right. And this is how it's brought down in the Shulchan Aruch, as the footnote says, the Makor Baruch, he says, Musar hapoel shelo yevatel ma'atkan u'ma'atkan. The worker has an obligation not to waste time here and there. He has to be very exacting with his time. Same as the Rambam wrote. Furthermore, he has to work with full strength. Shaharei, how do we know this? Shaharei Yaakov Hatzadik Omar, Ki b'chol kochi avadati et avichen. Yaakov said to Lavan, when he was speaking to his wives, he said about Lavan when he was speaking to his wives, you know that I worked for your father with my entire koyach, with all my strength. Lefichach notal scharo af ba'ilam hazeh. And that's why he merited to take his reward not only in the next world, but in this world as well. Shenamar vayifrotza ish ma'od ma'od, as it says in the pasuk that Yaakov, through that whole process of the speckled rods, he had a huge takeaway when after 20 years when it was time to leave Lavan. Now, so we're supposed to be like Yaakov. Don't be like the overweight guys at border control who crawl from place to place and speak to each other about something totally irrelevant. Okay, vafilu drives me nuts. But it's vafilu in balabayas lo mitnahegi tam kishura. Even if the employer is not dealing with them appropriately or properly, yesh lahem et ha'efsharut la'azov et makom ha'avoda o la'asot melachtan ne'emana. It's still the employee's ability. He can either quit the job or he can do a trustworthy output of work. Umilanu gadol miyakov avinu she'avad etzel Lavan. He says, there's no one greater as an example than Yaakov Avinu. He worked for Lavan. Lavan was not a great employer. Can we all agree? He probably didn't pay minimum wage. Yeah. The Lavan ha'arami hechalifet maskurto aseret monim. As the Torah testifies, Lavan switched the terms of Yaakov's employment 10 times over. Oh, I didn't tell you this. I told you this, and the Hainu meya pa'amim kamo shapirish Rashi sham. Rashi says 100 times. It really means. The Yaakov heyed bifnei nashav, and Yaakov testified to his wives. Ve'atena yedaten ki b'chol kochi avadeti et avichen. You know that I worked for your father with all my koach. V'chein omer lulavan hayiti bayom achalani choyrev v'kerach balayla. you know that by day I had to, I was consumed by heat and by ice at night. Batidad shenati me'inai, and sleep never, was ripped off of my eyes, meaning that, I didn't have a chance to take a siesta. I didn't have a chance to sleep properly. I've been working for you like a dog for 20 years. Ve'afal pi shalavan rima oto, Yaakov Avinu olav hashalom asa etz malachto ne'emana. And even though Lavan tried to rip him off and deceived him from time to time, Yaakov still worked faithfully for his employer. He had always had an option of leaving, could leave at any time. The imkain kol shekain b'makom shebal habayis lo merame otam, ela shehu misakem itam la'avod b'mechir namoch de'ein ona'a b'schiras payalim. He says, and therefore, certainly in a situation where an employer has negotiated a salary, you feel that he's paying you too little, but there's no din of ona'ah, of ripping someone off or overpaying or underpaying when it comes to employment issues. Now, that's not taking into consideration dina de malchusa, the law of the land. The law of the land, if it says that you have to pay a minimum wage, then you're not allowed to, according to halacha, pull shtick, right? Devadai aleihim lasos malachtam ne'emana. And therefore, they certainly have an obligation to do their work faithfully. So there's never a heter to go in half-cocked and, just do the basics. You don't have that right. And so this phenomenon that some of you quoted about, what is it, work to rule? Is that the term? That's an abhorrent attitude in society, right? We should be encouraging the members of our society to work with maximum output and to use whatever methods of negotiation that are possible through the union. But to train people to have a completely negative work ethic is a deplorable tactic in trying to move
society.
Yeah, it's very corrosive to society. It's very corrosive to society when people have that attitude. I don't know. Look, as much as the unions have done good, they've done a heck of a lot. I think they've done much more bad than good overall.
Right? I mean, before the unions, the bosses had too much.
Yeah,
power.
it is a
It's like
pendulum. But I got to be honest for you, the pendulum's been
too far the other way.
swung so too far for the last several decades
Yeah.
that it's ridiculous what's going on with the unions today. And even people who who are members of the unions hate the unions, because the unions many times will be manipulative and overbearing, even upon the employees whom they represent. And so it's, I don't know. Okay.
So thoughts.
Yep. Okay. Zuchut pitzuyim la uvdat meshek bayit. Okay. So what is this referring to? Okay. This woman is a housekeeper. I'm not familiar with this phrase meshek bayit, but it has something to do with domestic help. Let me just look it up. Let's see what it means. Meshek bayit. Household.
Working in the household.
Yeah.
Work in the household.
Meshek bayit. Okay. Ani ovedet b'meshek bayit kvar kama shanim. I'm a domestic, what do they call it? A domestic house helper. I'm a housekeeper. I've been so for many years. The lachrona putarti me avodati me achar v'hamishpacha etzla. Sorry. And so recently I was let go. Me'achar v'hamishpacha etzla avadati, because the family for whom I was working chitna et kol hayiladim ve'ein lem tzorech ba'ozeret. Married off all their kids. Parents are empty nesters now. They don't need a housekeeper anymore. They don't need a nanny. They don't need someone to pick up the toys. So ha'im magia li pitzuyim al pi halacha. am I entitled to some kind of pension or severance according to halacha? So let me
Usually
just,
they have a pension automatically for everybody.
over and above. But if that wasn't part of the deal, how can they just at the end of this say? Maybe a pension.
yeah, I'm not really sure what the basis of
Or
this
even-
question is.
Even the package of some sort. of-
Am I entitled to some kind of
Severance.
package, to
Severance.
some kind of
Severance.
severance? Yeah, I think that's really what she's talking about. Okay, so here's the question, right? Now, a lot of people, let's be very straightforward. A lot of people, when it comes to domestic help, do not go through the normal channels of employment,
Mhm.
right? A Marvin and the government usually looks the other way. Is that a fair thing to
Well,
say?
it's under the radar.
can't.
basically.
How they gonna even know?
They don't know.
Right, they don't even know, but the question is, like, obviously, if you ask the CRA, do I have to pay what is it?
Source deductions. and
Workers' comp and,
All the source deductions, all employee deductions.
Technically, if you're an employee, you would have to take all those deductions. and
Yeah,
put
it's
it
the
on books.
employee in Ontario that has to submit it, not the
A lot
employer.
of people characterize that as an independent contractor, in which case you're not into that whole regime. There's no SID, there's no workers' comp, there's no nothing.
Okay.
But even then, they don't
They don't
cash.
enforce it.
and they don't take, the other side doesn't pay taxes either, right?
so if I'm I'm a homeowner and I hire some domestic help, some Filipino woman, and she's been working for me for years, and I've just been leaving her an envelope of cash every Friday. Am I in violation of the law?
Only by pay your cash, you're in violation. of it.
Why is that?
Because you have to pay source deductions.
Yeah,
No, you don't.
She has to
Not as
declare
an-
the income.
Not as an employer.
no, but she has to
No, they-
declare the income.
Well, you gotta submit, you pay everything.
That's for you.
Hire
You
someone
do.
like
In
that.
Ontario, it's the employer has to do it. In a
It's-
domestic situation, employee sort of,
And she'd have to declare the income, and she won't.
yeah.
You don't have to pay.
She'd have to declare the income, and she likely
Yeah,
won't.
and
No,
that's,
but
that's
that's
on her
in
side.
the
but on
work.
your side,
Well, that's what I'm at. So that's-
Employer.
So I'm not an employer.
So you have to do it.
She's an independent contractor. And
You have to pay the HST.
do I have to pay her
Well, only if
HST?
she
Only
makes
if
more
she
than
makes
30,000.
35.
If you pay her more than 30,000, you have to get a HST registration number and take HST, but if it's lower, which it usually is, no. You have to do anything, just pay her. But she's also not entitled to any of the severance or termination pay, it's under the Employment
Or,
Standards Act
or
either,
vacation.
or vacation pay, or any of those
The only thing is
things.
you can get sued because if, let's say she was on the job
Yeah.
and she got injured on the job.
Yeah.
Then if you're not paying workers' compensation,
And you only have to pay workers' comp if you're an employee, an employer.
Employer, she's a
Right, so
contractor.
if she's not an employee per se, you don't have to pay any of the
She's an
statutory
independent
stuff.
contractor.
And you're not
you don't
exposed
have-
either.
No, you're not.
Not in Ontario.
Probably she's not entitled to anything like that.
Okay. So we're all off the hook. Anyway, no, I mean, I
I
think,
pay taxes for all my cleaning.
no, I know, I've never met anyone who hires, I mean, I guess if you were to go to these agencies where they will find someone for you, so then they have to, then they,
Yeah, a company has to pay, but not an
But
individual.
because they're employed by them.
right.
Once we sponsor one cleaning lady.
What's
we
that?
sponsor her, And we have to.
Oh, you
pay
sponsored a
and
cleaning
pay
lady.
Everything, taxes, and everything, and hold taxes from her and declare it, so it's like an
But
employee.
that's a
Yeah, but
federal-
you're
that's
in
a
a
federal government
sponsorship
Sponsorship
Yes.
program,
That's a
where
different
it's a
thing.
whole different regime.
Yeah, but you
But she's
have
still
to
making the same
hold
amount of
taxes
money, but
and-
she's making under the 30,000.
That's a whole different arrangement.
She's not.
Plain arrangement we have with a babysitter or with a nanny or whatever it is, it's just independent contract, relationship. We pay them and they're supposed to pay taxes on it, but if they don't, they don't.
It's not
Okay.
her problem.
And it's not right. So it's not something that I have to feel responsible for. Okay, I just wanted to be able to. I do feel much better. Thank you. Okay, so now, now the question is there any halachic obligation? You know,
To pay taxes, you mean?
yeah, no, this woman, we'll call her Odessa, whatever her name is. So Odelia. She's been working for my family for 20 years. I even inherited her from my in-laws, right? You know, it's what happens quite often, right? And she's been working in our family for 20 years. She's getting old. She's herself now as a grandmother, and she wants to, and we don't need her anymore. And we want to just let her go. What is our halachic obligation? What kind of either moral or halachic obligation do we have to this woman? And really, the question is being asked by a Jewish employee here. In other words, let's say the woman's an Israeli woman or a Russian Israeli woman, and she's been working for the family for years. What is her entitlement? Okay.
Probably I just have to make one little.
No. I don't want to hear anymore. I don't want
So this lady, if she worked exclusively for this family, full time, every day, and they controlled exactly what she was to do and when, she didn't work anywhere else. It could be that you can call her an independent contractor, but she's in substance an employee. But whereas what we do is we have someone once a week or like whatever it is, that's not an employee. Okay, so I'm saying it depends on the situation. You can call anything
So
you
a day
want.
worker.
Call her, a day worker, whatever.
Yeah.
She's an employee probably in the eyes of the law if she's there for 5 years every single day of her life, and she comes and that's her job. And so then you would have to do all this stuff. Put her on the books, pay her as an employee, withholding tax, and then at the end of it, she'd probably be
They
entitled
don't
to,
enforce that.
the minimum would be 2 weeks per year of service is what the statutory minimum is for someone who's an employee. To let them go, whatever, you gotta pay them 2 weeks per year of service for that sort of stuff. And at common law, it's about a month per year of service. So it could be, a couple months she'd be entitled to some payment maybe. But other than if she's not an employee, you don't have to pay her.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Now, hine makor hapitzuyim bahalacha umima shekosav b'sefer hachinuch. So the whole source of paying someone a severance is based on something that appears not in the Torah, not in the Gemara, but in the Sefer Hachinuch. Who writes, sheyesh mitzvat aseh laha'anik le'eved ivri bizman sheyetze mitachat yado l'cheirus. We know that the Torah says that when you emancipate a Hebrew slave, when he goes free after working for 6 years, the Torah says, ha'anek ta'anik lo, that you shall surely give him some kind of parting gift, okay? V'lo lishloach oto biyadayim rekot. You're not allowed to send him away empty-handed. Shenemar ha'anek ta'anik lo mitzonecha umigarnecha umiikvecha it's in Parshas Re'eh. We read it every Yontif, right? You shall surely give him gifts from your sheep, from your grain, and from your wine that God has blessed you with. V'noheget mitzvazu bein bizcharim bein benekevos bizman shahaya beis hamikdash kayim. And so the Sefer Achinuch writes that this mitzvah of ha'anaka, which is discussed in the Gemara, is extant only during the times of the temple. She'ein din eved ivri noeg ela bizman shahayovel noeg, because there is no din of a Hebrew slave anymore unless the Yovel law applies, and the Yovel doesn't apply when there's no temple. Umikol makom, but then the Chinuch adds, af bizman hazeh yishma chacham v'yosef lekach, that this is a pasuk. A wise man hears and extrapolates. Sheim sochar echad mibnei Yisrael va'avado zman meruba o afilu mu'at. That if a person hires another Jew to work for them, and they work for them either for an extended or shorter period, sheyanik lo b'tzeito me'imo lefi ma shebercha Hashem, that he should give him parting gifts based on what God has blessed him with. Kishor hamitzvah she'adam tzarich lahaknot ba'atzmo uvenafsho midot me'ulot sheyirachem al mi she'avad etzlo. He says, because the whole root of this mitzvah of ha'anaka is that a person should acquire proper character traits, that he should have some level of compassion on someone who worked faithfully for him. In other words, the Sefer HaChinuch writes that the strict letter of the law does not require you to give a long-term employee any kind of severance or parting gift. But proper ethics require you to learn from the law of the Eved Ivri and apply it to any employee. That if a person has been faithful to you and worked and done so many things for you, you should feel that sense of gratitude, that when they depart from you, you should give them some kind of parting gift to express your gratitude. So that's the language of the Sefer HaChinuch. Ulam, L'das HaRambam, Gam bizman shaya beis hamikdash kayim lo hayta mitzvat ha'anaka, ele imkein beistin machru oso le'eved. Now it's interesting that according to the Rambam, by contrast, even when the laws of Eved Ivri were extant during temple times, the mitzvah of ha'anaka, of giving him parting gifts, did not apply to any Eved Ivri. It only applied to those Eved Ivris who were sold by the Beis Din. Aval im ha'eved macharet atzmo miritzono, ein mitzvah latet lo ha'anaka. But if a person sold himself into slavery, let's say, in other words, the Beis Din would sell someone into slavery if a guy stole, for example, and he doesn't, or he caused significant property damage to somebody else and doesn't have the ability to pay. So then, in those situations, Beis Din will sell that person as an Eved Ivri to work off the debt. Then there's a mitzvah of ha'anaka, says the Rabbi. Rabbi probably derives this from somewhere. He says there's no mitzvah of ha'anaka if a person voluntarily sells themselves into slavery. V'im kein lefi zeh, kol poel hayom sheholech la'avod meritzono, ein kan makom lepitzuyim. Therefore, according to the Rambam, anyone who willingly submits themselves to someone else's employment is not entitled to any kind of severance. Ulam dasa toisvus bekidushin hi shegam b'mocher atzmo yesh mitzvah lahanik lo mehatzon u'mehagoren u'mehayakev. But Tosfos disagrees with the Rambam and holds that any Eved Ivri, even someone who sells himself, is entitled, there's an obligation to give him whatever you have of your livestock and your agricultural blessings. So that's the question. Do we?
The difference between, why does the Rambam make that difference?
I don't know. I don't know on what basis the Rambam writes this. We'd have to research the halacha in Hilchos Savadim, Perek Gimel Hilchos Savadim. Maybe we'll take a look there later. So he says, Omnam yesh lomar, de bischir lo shayach achiluk shekasov harambam bemocher atzim lemachruhu beistim dedin echad lahem. So Rav Sharaga says, on the other hand, we could make an argument that when it comes to an employee, there is no distinction to be drawn whether, he was forced to work or whether he voluntarily submitted himself to employment. Shaharei kasav hayam shel shlomo hatam sheyesh chiluk bein mocher atzim lemachruhu beistim hu. Says the Maharshal asks the question you just asked, Moish, why should there be a difference according to the Rambam between selling yourself voluntarily versus being sold by the Beis Din? He says, the kevin shemachar es atzmo over ala pasuk kili b'nei Yisrael avadim v'lo avadim la avadim lekach lo magia lo ha'anaka. He says it's a penalty to a guy who voluntarily sells himself into slavery. The Torah says that the Jewish people are my slaves, and they therefore should not be enslaved to people who are my slaves. Don't be a slave to a slave. Just be a slave of Hashem, an Eved Hashem. So the fact that a person sold himself into slavery and he put himself in that position, he gets penalized to be deprived of the Hanaka that would normally be coming to someone who is an Eved Ivri. V'im kain, Bisachir shelo avar al iser v'lo avadim la avadim Dino kamo machruhu beistin. And therefore, an employee, he hasn't sold himself into slavery. So there's no reason to penalize him, and therefore he should be no different from the regular Eved Ivri that's sold by the Beistin. And therefore, just like there's an ethical imperative to give parting gifts to an Eved Ivri, the same should apply to any employee. The Sma writes in general that a person should always go the extra mile beyond what the law requires of him when it comes to paying his employees. You should give them even when you could arguably be exempt from paying them, you should still pay them. We know that we have this principle that we've seen this principle before. Let's say an employee botches a job, right? And so why should I pay you? You know, I just had a situation, I needed to get a plumber because my kitchen sink was backed up. First world problems, right? So the first plumber came at someone's recommendation, couldn't fix it. Like they snaked it, and then they got a bigger snake, just the thing that just they couldn't get it down. And then another plumber told me, oh, call this guy Nazari, some kind of, I think he's Russian or Ukrainian, so barely speaks English, but the guy has this company. He says, no matter what it is, you will not have a clog anymore. I think like he threatens the clog and it just goes down, right? Yeah, right. And so it took them a long time. They found the pipe downstairs in the basement that was not positioned correctly. They had to replace. They opened up the wall, and it was a big pachkarai. But they figured it out, and they fixed it. So I didn't want to, but you got to pay the first plumber, even though, he spent half the day trying to fix the clog. So on the one hand, you don't feel like paying him, but on the other hand, so I said, what do I owe you? He said, well, for any service call, we charge $200 and something. So I gave him 200 and something bucks for nothing. But still, you got to go. Could I have made a claim? Yeah, but you always have to go lifnim mishuras hadin, and to pay them their wages, even if you could argue that min hadin you're going to be pater. Okay, we'll have to finish this in Mitzvah Hashem next week. See you, God willing, on Monday. Have a wonderful Shabbos, everybody.